All right. I am assuming that everyone are Zoom pros now. We've been living in this Zoom life for a little while. Did want to cover a couple housekeeping things. We ask that everybody please keep your microphone on mute during the presentation. Should anyone have questions, feel free to drop any questions that you might have in the chat box. I'll be monitoring the chat box and I'll try to get to questions as best I can. If I'm not able to get to it right away, we will circle back during the discussion period. So any questions that might pop up along the way, again, feel free to put that right into the chat box. During the discussion period, there'll be opportunity to ask questions or give comments using the chat box or unmuting and speaking to everybody. And for anyone who doesn't feel comfortable sharing comments or questions during this meeting, we'll also be sharing our contact information and other ways that you can share comments later on. Sherry, if you're ready, we're gonna go ahead and start with introduction. So I'll start with myself. Aloha again, everyone. My name is Lily Makaila. I'm a planner with Townscape Inc. And we are working with Maui County Department of Water Supply to put together the Moloka'i Water Plan. I'll be facilitating this evening. I recognize a lot of the names that are on here this evening, but do see a couple new folks. So aloha, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Sherry and Bruce, if you don't mind going next.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Sherry Hiroka, also with Townscape Inc. Been working with Lily and Bruce and Maui County on this water plan, doing more on the back end side. I know a lot of you have been seeing Lily around. I've been kind of crunching numbers and whatnot, and I'll be doing the presentation tonight. So thank you for sharing with us up till now, and thanks for hanging in there with us as well.
Aloha, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Bruce Tuchida. I'm the Townscape Grandpa. Next.
Thank you, Bruce. Oh, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. This is Eva. I'm Eva Blumenstein. I'm the Planning Program Manager for Maui County Department of Water Supply. Well, thank you all for participating tonight.
Thanks, Eva.
Hi, my name is Marty Buckner, and I guess I'm the tutu of this project. I do manage the Moloka'i Water project for DWS, and I was responsible for inventorying the water use, consumption or demand, and production data. And I had a lot of fun working with Sherry and projecting that to the year 2040, the production as well as consumption. Thank you, Jonathan. We had a lot of fun doing that. And I just want to say that working with Sherry and Lily and Bruce has been, it's been an uplifting experience.
Thank you, Marty. All right, without any further ado, Sherry, if you're ready, we can dive right into the presentation.
Sure. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can everyone see the agenda? Okay, cool. Okay, so tonight we have gone through this first initial bullet, kind of getting everyone oriented, and I'll be doing the presentation, just hopefully not too long, on the preliminary draft plan, and then we're gonna have some time for discussion at the end and go over next steps. So we are working on the Moloka'i Water Use and Development Plan, and that is mandated by the State Water Code. It's part of the Hawai'i Water Plan, which is not just one document. It's made up of a series of documents. And if you can look at this diagram here, you'll see, if you can see my cursor kind of circling around this first tier, the Water Resource Protection Plan and the Water Quality Plan really lay out the water protection policies for the state. And then we also take a look at the state water needs in the state water projects plan and the agricultural water use and development plan. And then down here in the third tier, we have the county water use and development plans. So each county is mandated to do a water use and development plan that's looking at the allocation of water to land use. Maui County has been doing a plan for each of the islands. So that's why we're focusing in on Moloka'i specifically. And these plans take into account, the land use plans for the area. So we are looking at the community plan as well as other land use plans like the Department of Hawai'i and Homeland's regional plan. So the overall goal for the Moloka'i plan is to balance the management of water resources with sustainable use. And in real general terms, we've been gathering a lot of data. We've been doing our preliminary analysis of issues and needs, and we're right here now on the preliminary draft water plan. So we've done a couple of iterations on our understanding of water demands and future water projections, and then we're trying to get a grasp on what are the resource values and the goals and principles of the community so that it can help guide us as we try to figure out, okay, what sources would be appropriate to meet those demands. And along the way, we've been fortunate enough to be able to talk to a lot of people and get a lot of information. So we've had a series of meetings since the beginning where we started back last year. And, we're just trying to really get as much information as we can. So, here's just a few of the things that we've been doing along the way. So for this preliminary draft, just a few things to kind of note. We have been calling it the water plan, the Moloka'i Water Plan, rather than the Water Use and Development Plan, which is the title of this document in the Water Code. And this is because, the state water code mandates this plan. And it's, as I mentioned, it says that it's supposed to set forth the allocation of water to land use. And that's very important. But we decided to call it the water plan instead because we want to look broader than that. In addition to the allocation of water to land use, we want to be more holistic and look at things like water resource management, community values, resource protection, and environmental and cultural needs. The other things that we're looking at in this preliminary draft is we're sharing some of the revised water demand projections. So a few months ago, we came and we had some projections, and since then, we've gotten additional information and revised them. And then we also want to understand the community values regarding water, and that's kind of the really important part that we're trying to get at this time. And then we're asking for feedback on preliminary water resource principles, and that way we can try to make these decisions about the water use. What we're not doing in this round, and I know we're getting a little antsy about this, is we haven't included what sources are going to be used to provide for the projected future water demand. And this is because, we wanted to be able to make sure that we understand the water resource values and principles so that we can make those decisions rather than, saying, hey, we think we know, so we'll just make those decisions. We thought we needed better guidance. So we know that water and water rights and laws and policies, management structure, they're all really unique in Hawaii as compared to other places, and Moloka'i especially. And so we have been really trying to better understand what these special circumstances are and what the needs are of the community so that we can really start to address these unique situations. And there's just so much to grasp. And we were told this when we first started, but we've really been amazed and there's just a lot to learn. And we just thank you for sharing. Even things like looking at this graphic of the ahupua'a and trying to figure out, what is it trying to tell us in terms of, the size and shape of these land divisions, what does that mean in terms of resources? So the last time we were here, we also went over some critical Moloka'i water issues. And these are detailed a little bit in the preliminary draft document. I'm not really going to go into a lot of them right now, but in general, we found that they've related to the ties of water to cultural and subsistence practices, the overall watershed health and sustainability, everyday use for domestic purposes, agricultural and other economic uses, management and regulations, efficiency and use, invasive species, the interconnectedness of water, all forms of water from Mauka to Makai, planning for climate change and the expected impacts of that, things like increased drought, more intense storms. Where is the water used and where are the sources located? And the affordability of water and its links to other utilities. So we've been trying to keep this in mind as we analyze and sift through the information we're gathering. And we've already started to receive comments about the issues that have not been represented or have not been represented well. So we're going to be, taking those into account and revising this as we come up with our public review draft. So back in March, we had presented some preliminary water demands. And as we mentioned before, we've since dug into the numbers a little bit more. We've gathered more data and we've met with some of the water users and providers. And so, we just want to share a little bit about our updated analysis. And just a couple of things, we have some key definitions in here. So as a reminder, water demand is the amount of water that we're actually using. So a lot of times it's what is coming out of your tap, what is it being registered at your water meter. And then production is how much water are we actually taking out of the resource. So how much are we pumping, how much are we diverting? And then we also have this other thing called unaccounted for water or water loss. So that's the difference between how much we're taking out of the resource versus how much we're actually using. And so, this unaccounted for water could be due to leaks. It could be due to data collection errors. It could be due to accounting errors and other things. So looking at existing water production, total production, so how much are we taking out of the resource, is about 7.8 million gallons of water per day. About a third of that is from groundwater, and about 2/3 of that is surface water. So looking at the groundwater, we have a total sustainable yield of 79 million gallons of water per day. And as a reminder, on the bottom right, the definition of sustainable yield is basically how much water can we sustainably pump out of an aquifer. And just a quick note on sustainable yield, these are calculated through modeling, and it doesn't always take into account things like how easy or difficult it might be to get at all of that water that we think is in the ground. Doesn't look at things like how much it might cost to get that water. And the modeling is really only as good as the data that we have. And so we're always gathering more data and trying to improve on our estimates. But the Water Commission, who sets these numbers, does try to be conservative in its estimates where it can. For permitted use, and so this is how much water people have permits for to extract. And so the island-wide number is 7.3 million gallons of water per day, so about 9% of sustainable yield. This means that about 91% of sustainable yield is unallocated. And sounds like that's great. Sounds like we have a lot of water. But of course, it really depends on which aquifer we're talking about. And if you look at the graphic on the right, we try to kind of show this. So you can see that each circle on each aquifer is meant to represent sustainable yield, where the green is what is unallocated and the red is allocated. So for some of these aquifers, you know, like looking at Wailao, it looks like it has a large sustainable yield and nothing allocated. But then we look at Kuala Pu'u and we have a large portion of that is allocated. Okay, let's see. So groundwater production. Of the almost 3 million gallons of water per day that is pumped from the ground, about a third of that is unaccounted for. You can see here in the graphic.
What's that mean?
Oh, the unaccounted for water. So again, it's you know, the difference between what is pumped versus what is coming out of your tap, basically. So surface water production, of the almost 5 million gallons of water per day, unaccounted for water is only about 7%, but we have this note here that says that that's a deceptive number. That's because we don't have a lot of good data on things like, you know, how much water is diverted, how much water is being used, or both. So that was a really tricky number, and we believe that it's deceptively low. So existing water demand. So who's using the water? There are 9 public water systems. So these are entities that are providing, the larger entities that are providing drinking water. Maui Department of Water Supply accounts for 3 public water systems. Moloka'i Ranch also accounts for 3 public water systems. There's also DHHL, Covella Plantation, and the National Park Service. And then we have 2 large surface water non-potable systems, so Moloka'i Irrigation System and the Mountain Water System, and then various small individually owned groundwater wells and surface water diversions. So looking into each of these a little bit more, Maui DWS has, again, 3 water systems. They're served by groundwater wells. And if you look at the left-hand side of this graphic, this is the total demand. So about 724,000 gallons of water per day, mostly for domestic uses. And then to support that, there's production of about 892,000 gallons of water per day across all 3 systems. So that's about a 19% water loss. And this is where that water is coming from. And this is all in the report. And if you look at the bottom right, it will tell you what figure that is in the report. So all of these graphics in this slideshow will have that note. Department of Hawaiian Homelands. So the blue area is the service areas. So again, on the left, total demand, about 410,000 gallons of water per day for domestic uses, and production of 451,000 gallons of water per day, about a 9% water loss. And that's pretty good. Moloka'i Ranch. So for the public water systems, the potable water systems, that would be this kind of blue line here. And the service areas are in purple. Their total demand is about 380,000 gallons of water per day, mostly for domestic purposes, and production of about 560,000 gallons of water per day, about 32% higher than demand. Covella Plantation on the South Shore. Total demand of about 160,000 gallons per day, production of 190,000 gallons per day, about a 17% water loss. National Park Service, 27,000 gallons of water per day demand, about 37,000 gallons per day in production, about a 27% water loss. Moloka'i irrigation system. So this is owned by the State Department of Agriculture. So the demand here is about 2.4 million gallons of water per day for agriculture. And one thing to note, it looks very similar to the total production, and that's because the production data we received was apparently metered end use. So that's basically demand. So we believe that, you know, the unaccounted for water here is incorrect, and we just don't have that data. Mountain water system. So this is the pink line. This is surface water. Total demand of about 117,000 gallons of water per day, mostly for agriculture, and production of 409,000 gallons of water per day. So about 71% unaccounted for water. Groundwater, other private. So again, small groundwater wells, total demand of about 767,000 gallons of water per day, a lot of it for agriculture. And for production, we didn't have good production data for this. So the production and demand numbers are very, they're the same because we just didn't have good data. And then small private surface water sources, almost 2.1 million gallons of water per day, primarily for agriculture. And again, we don't have good data, so we don't have a good unaccounted for water estimate here. So looking forward to 2040, this is the methodology that we used to be able to project water demand. We had 3 different scenarios: a low growth, a mid growth, and a high growth. And in the low growth scenario, we just said there would be no change from current. The mid growth is what we're saying is the most likely, and this is because it's based on the land use plans, so the island plan. And so in this instance, we used an increase of 0.5% of water demand per year. And this is aligned with the 2018 Moloka'i Island Plan. So that was applied to Maui DWS, Moloka'i Ranch, Kawela Plantation, National Park Service, and the Mountain Water System. For Department of Hawaiian Homelands, they did their own specific projections as a part of the 2017 State Water Projects Plan. So we used those projections for them. For the Moloka'i irrigation system, a lot of that is serving Department of Hawaiian Homeland. So we also use the projections from the State Water Projects Plan, and we assume no increase for non-DHHL users. And then for the private surface water diversions and for the private wells, we said that there was going to be no change in use. For the high growth, so we run these numbers, just in case water use is higher. We said that there was going to be a 1% increase in water demand every year. And we applied that to Maui DWS, Moloka'i Ranch, and the Mountain Water System. Department of Hawaiian Homelands, we used, again, projections from the State Water Projects Plan. Moloka'i Irrigation System, we used the State Water Projects Plan projection. And because that was specific to Department of Hawaiian Homelands, we also included a 1% increase in water use per year to account for non-DHHL users. For Kawela Plantation, we said that there would be a full use of their entitled lands, which is about 39 additional homes. And then no change again for private surface water and groundwater. So I will let you know that we have started to receive some comments on our assumptions. So we'll take a look at this again, but this is what we've used so far. So what does that look like in terms of water use? This first column on the left is current, so this is existing use. So about 7 million gallons of water per day. The second column is low growth, so same, again, no change. Mid-growth demand scenario, which is our most likely, that we're saying it is our most likely. It's about 104% increase in demand. So over 7 million gallons of water per day increase, and mostly for agriculture. And then in the high, it's 125% increase in demand. So over 8 million gallons of water per day, again, mostly for agriculture. So what does that look like in terms of who's using the water? The largest growth was for Department of Hawaiian Homelands. So if you look on the left-hand side for their potable water system, it's over 1 million gallons per day increase. So quite a lot in terms of percentage as well. And then if you look on the right-hand side for the Moloka'i irrigation system, so this was a really big increase, about 6 million gallons of water per day. And again, this accounts for Department of Hawaiian Homeland's growth in agriculture. There was moderate growth in most of the rest of the users. And again, no growth in private groundwater and surface water. So in terms of what the water is being used for, the largest growth, again, agriculture, primarily due to projected growth in Department of Hawaiian Homelands. Moderate growth in most of the rest. Domestic non-residential percentage-wise actually was pretty high, about 160% growth, or about 490,000 gallons of water per day. And then for military was the only one with no growth. So if we're looking at demand on the left, we're looking at 14 million gallons of water per day, most of it for agriculture. And if we assume that we have the same water efficiencies, the same percentage of water loss, I guess, as we see today, then we can assume that we'll need production of over 15 million gallons of water per day by 2040. So water demands are currently served by sources in regions, sometimes served by sources in regions other than where the demand is. For example, we have potable water in the west and the southeast that are served by sources in the central area. We have some central non-potable demands for agriculture served by surface water in the northeast. So there's movement of water. But if we look at where the demands are, this is where we think we'd need the water. So in the northeast, we would need 89,000 gallons of water per day production if it were to service all of its demands within that area, as well as a production of over 1 million gallons of water per day in surface water. So that's what this table is trying to show. So it looks like there's enough water in each area, but in this next phase after this, we're going to be looking more closely at each type of water source, the demand, the feasibility of getting in, tapping into each water source, and the potential impacts of using each water source. So this is where we're trying to get input from everyone on how we should be thinking about these things. And some other things we are already aware of, projected future demands in Kuala Pu'u exceed current sustainable yield. We know that, there's existing and projected future water demands cannot be met, in the west that the existing and projected future water demands cannot be met by water resources in the region. Southeast, the existing and projected future water demands will require new water use permits or increases in existing water use permits. And then a large increase in the agricultural land use in the central area is going to really increase the need for water from the Northeast. And so we're going to need to figure out how to get that water there. So again, this is kind of really where we're hoping to get a lot of feedback and input from everyone. We're calling this a framework for allocating water. So how should we be thinking about each water source? And there are different ways to identify and evaluate water sources. So we're trying to, I guess, understand the values and the goals and what principles should we be applying as we're looking at each of these things. So the way that we've defined these terms, values, so beliefs, understandings, and priorities that guide decision-making. Goals, we're looking at these as direction setters. So how are these values expressed? What is our ideal future state? And then principles, what are the fundamental rules that are going to guide our identification of water sources and which water sources we should be using. So I'm going to take us through each of the 8 values that we've identified so far, at least. And just a little note, so it says value 8.1, and this just refers to the section that it can be found in the report. And I'm going to read through each of these in case there's somebody on the phone who cannot read these slides. So value 8.1, land and water are intimately entwined. Aloha Aina initiatives to protect and restore the uplands are critical for healthy water resources. So the understanding that, protecting and restoring Mauka areas is really vital to healthy water resources. So our goal would be healthy forested watersheds. And our principles, Moloka'i's Mauka watersheds are critical for the recharge of groundwater aquifers, stream flows, and freshwater seepage into nearshore ocean environments. And balanced water use includes uses that require high quality water to remain in the environment. Value 8.2, honor the Aina and what it provides, but also understand its limitations. So when resources are stressed, we can see it through degraded ecosystems. And if we observe what the land is telling us, then we can take action to improve things. So our goals, sustainable groundwater aquifers, healthy stream flows, and high quality water. And our principles, observations and information are necessary for the community to manage its resources. And adaptive management allows us to continually learn and adjust our practices to better care for natural resources. So collecting that data, sharing that data, and then making use of that data. Value 8.3, take only what is needed and don't waste. Malama the natural systems so that they are efficient and effective. Always conserve the resource. So the Moloka'i community is one of the best users of water, and you guys are really good at conserving already. But there's always room for improvement. And there are some aging water systems that could be improved as well. And so the goals would be minimal water waste, efficient water storage and transmission. And the principles, conservation practices for all water uses reduces the amount of water we need to take out of the environment. And repair and replacement of leaking, aging, and inefficient infrastructure reduces waste and protects the resource. Value 8.4, use technology to make better use of our water and prepare for anticipated climate change impacts. It is important to provide water to the Moloka'i community without diminishing the resource. So looking at things like reuse, recycling, gray water use, stormwater capture. So the goals, sustainable ground and surface water sustainable ground and surface water extraction, and resilient water resources that can respond to climate change impacts. Principles: water reuse provides for some non-potable water needs without extracting additional ground or surface water. And diversified water sources improve resiliency in the face of future climate change and its effects on water demands and sources. Value 8.5, ask experts from within the community for guidance. Look to the past to help avoid future mistakes and mismanagement. So just that understanding that the Moloka'i community has an intimate and long history with its water. So trying to tap into that place-based knowledge so that, we don't keep repeating our errors and just trying to plan better in the future. So our goal, informed and place-based decision-making. Principles: area histories and cultural practices can inform us about resources and how they should be managed. And regional sustainability leads to smart decisions that protect resources island-wide. Value 8.6, Aina Momona, strive towards making Moloka'i abundant, not just sufficient. Seek to balance aquifer recharge and withdrawal rates. So the idea of when we take, we should give back. The goal: abundant groundwater, aquifers, and stream flows. Principles: watershed management and recharge will ensure healthy aquifers and streams, and abundant natural resources ensure healthy communities. Value 8.7, Moloka'i takes care of its own. The community works together to provide for itself and each other. So this was something that we kind of got from one of the stories that we heard, and it's in the beginning of our preliminary draft. So the story of Ha'aiku. So remembering that, if each person is mindful of the next, that can ensure that the entire community has what it needs to survive. So the goal: a community that supports itself and each other. Principle: if people demonstrate mindfulness towards others and dedication to the entire community, Moloka'i will come together as it always has done, to make sure that everyone is taken care of. Last one, value 8.8. Water sustains life, culture, and the environment and should be accessible to all. So Moloka'i residents pay some of the highest water rates in the country. But since water is a necessary resource, we feel that it should be reliably and affordably available. So the goal is water delivery is affordable. And the principle: reliable and affordable water for residential and agricultural purposes provides for community health and the local economy. So potential water source options. And again, these are things that we haven't dug into too much yet, but we're going to be looking into them in the next draft. So here are some of the things that we are and will be looking more into. So for those of you who haven't taken a look at the preliminary draft yet, there are hard copies on Island along with some comment sheets at these various schools. So Kilohana Elementary School, Mauna Loa Elementary School, Moloka'i High School, Moloka'i Public Library, and the Maui County Moloka'i District Office, so the DWS office there. It's also available online. We have our project website, and we can put the link in the chat as well. And we'll come back to this. Comments can be provided to Lily. Her contact information is here. We can also put that in the chat. We're asking for comments by the end of the month. And if you want, you can direct your camera phone to this QR code for our link tree. And it has all of the information there as well.
I'm gonna drop a link to the chat box. And Sherry, there was a bunch of comments in the chat box. So we're gonna go through those kind of one by one. All right, go ahead.
Okay. I'm gonna stop sharing then for now.
Okay, so thanks everybody for all the questions and comments in the chat box. What I'd like to do is I'm gonna start right at the top and we're gonna go through and kind of tackle each question and comment as they were shared. And then if there's more discussion, then I'll kind of call on some folks or if you need to clarify, then you can chime in at that point. Okay, so I'm scrolling back to, I think the first comment from Neil was a clarification. So Neil Fuji of Seaworm, he commented just a heads up, by the way, the Ag Water Use Development Plan 2019 is not yet adopted by Seaworm. So just a heads up about that. Thank you, Neil.
Very nice.
There were two comments from Uncle Glenn Tevez about one, HHA has 200,000 acres. Uncle sent a correction to us by email today with 300,000 acres. Also, the MIS was completed in 1988, not in 1989. Thank you for those comments. We do have them on our matrix of comments, so thank you. Also, comment from Uncle Glenn, Moloka'i Ranch cannot be continuing to carry water over 13 Hawai'i. Comment from Auntie Lori Buchanan, in critical issues, there's no mention of the negative impact of big agriculture. From Jonathan Scheuer, how is the listing of issues related to the rest of the plan? So I'm gonna assume that's about kind of section 5, the critical issues in the plan. So one, I think it's really important for the context of the water plan that there's a context that discusses kind of the critical issues and concerns that folks are grappling with on the island. I did want to mention one comment that we got at our Tuesday meeting, brought up that we, hadn't included enough historical information about kind of water history, water conflicts, and even kind of the water laws and policies. And one of those comments suggested that we kind of include more information. So I think, one big portion of the water plan, right, is the allocation of water to the various uses. But I think in order to really have a comprehensive water plan, speaking to the history, the background, the context, and understanding the kind of current landscape of water issues, I think all of that has a pretty strong. Gary, did you want to chime in? Did I forget anything?
No, that was really good. And I would just add a little bit about, the issues, I think, kind of start to help us understand what the concerns are, so that when we start looking at water sources, we can, it's not just, an accounting thing, right? It's, oh, there's water there and then there's need here, and so let's just do that. It's trying to get a better understanding, and like Lydia was saying, that context of what seems to make sense and what some of the concerns are from people in terms of using that water in that way. So it's an understanding thing for us, I think.
Thanks, Sherry. There's a bit of a discussion in the chat box about the term unaccounted for water loss. So Auntie Lori Buchanan mentioned unaccounted for water loss for Moloka'i Ranch is huge. Neil Fuji suggested using the term non-revenue water instead of unaccounted for water. Auntie Lori disagreed. And on that same note, I think one other person chimed in. Kale Hirata chimed in and said non-revenue versus unaccounted for are defined differently. I request to keep the term unaccounted for water and not change to non-revenue water. Scrolling back up. Okay, Uncle Glenn said, according to Delwyn Oki of USGS, he feels that sustainable yield of Wudp is 4.5 mgd, not 5 mgd. A priority system needs to be established with number 1, DHHL, number 2, county, and number 3, Moloka'i Ranch. Much of Hawaiian homeland still doesn't have access to water, especially upper Kalama'ula and Pala'au, as well as Makakupaia. And also Auntie Lori chimed in, sustainable yield from Moloka'i is not valid due to no data. Jonathan Scheuer chimed in, sustainable yield is calculated based on a simple equation, cannot be called a model, but it's not a model. It can be called a model, sorry, but it's not a model like the USGS model. Sherry, can you speak a little bit about sustainable yield and kind of how we're utilizing sustainable yield in the plan so far?
Yeah, and actually what we had wanted to do was to have CWRM do a little presentation about sustainable yield and how it's calculated, as well as some other things. So that is something that we also need to look at, because we are mandated to be in compliance with the other components of the Hawai'i Water Plan. And so that includes the Water Resource Protection Plan, which actually has the sustainable yield for each aquifer. And so those are the numbers that we are using. That said, we understand that there are concerns about those numbers and what it does and does not account for, and concerns about data. So I think that's something that we can discuss with CWRM about, how do we, I guess, try and address some of those concerns. Eva, did you have something you want to add?
No, I think you covered that. Yeah, so I mean, our starting point is the 2019 Water Resource Protection Plan with the sustainable yields that were adopted in that plan. I mean, we have to be consistent with the Water Resource Protection Plan. But that said, this plan can discuss, what are the, it can even guide CWRM in terms of what we want to prioritize in updates and what kind of data to look at. Are there USGS models that were not incorporated into that latest revised sustainable yield and values? So I think the plan can discuss that, but we're still going to have to be consistent with the sustainable yield as whatever model was used to adopt it and the numbers that are there.
Thank you, Sherry. There's a comment from Jonathan Scheuer about DHHL's numbers being low. Jonathan, did you want to chime in any more about that?
No, the DHL folks who attended on Tuesday said, hey, they look low. And I looked at them and I'm like, yeah, they look low. We're certainly at the wellhead pumping more than that. So I'm not exactly sure what numbers were used to come up with that average and what the quality is. I know that you worked with some of the staff to get some of our delivery numbers, but we have issues with non-revenue water as well, right? So
Okay.
It seems low by like 100,000 gallons at least, I think.
Okay, so we can meet up with you guys again to just share where we got our numbers from and see what adjustments need to be made.
Okay.
Thanks.
Definitely. Thank you, Jonathan. Comment from Uncle Glenn Tebes. DHHL is serving Kalae. Not sure if county is buying that to serve their users. Sherry, are we able to speak at all about the water system serving Kalae? Or Eva, sorry, I see you.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, so Kalae, in the past, it was actually served by the Kalae tunnel, but we are purchasing water from DHL. So it's the DHL wells that currently serve Kalai through Department of Water Supply meters and infrastructure.
Thank you, Eva. Comment from Auntie Lori Buchanan. DHHL just went to Seaworm to secure water allocation. Yes, that is correct. There was a question, Sherry, if you're able to pull up figure 7-17, that one is the Moloka'i Ranch existing water demand and production in the slide. There was a question about how are we defining domestic purposes for what's reflected in that graph.
Sorry, trying to find it. Too many buttons. Where is it? This one. Okay, is this the right one?
Yep, that's the one. So are you able to speak to what is the big orange block, domestic purposes?
Domestic residential purposes, so like household use.
I believe so. That was a question from Jonathan. So it said, how are you defining domestic purposes?
Yeah, so we relied on, Marty, correct me if I'm wrong, but we relied on Moloka'i Ranch to categorize the uses. So is that correct, Marty?
Sorry, Marty, you're muted.
Yeah,
Oh,
with our guidance that the domestic residential is, I would say, basically anything that's not commercial, right? The domestic non-residential is commercial. Is that right, Sherry?
It could, well, yeah, so in general, I'm not saying specifically for Moloka'i Ranch, but in general, domestic non-residential could include things like schools and churches. So anything that's not residential, basically, but yeah.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you both.
Mhm.
Comment from Uncle Glenn Tevez, DHHL water use from Kuala Pu'u was close to 0.5 MGD when they applied for an increase in the late 90s. Okay, question from, or comment from Auntie Lori Buchanan. MIS in 5.6 of the draft does not mention the audit and audit findings. And also comment, mountain water sources are being diverted to supply Kalaupapa. Maybe we can include, we can look more into the audit and the audit findings. Yeah, Sherry?
Yeah.
We are going to be, like I mentioned, there was a comment from Tuesday about kind of us putting more into kind of the historical information and getting more historical context. So that might be something that would fit into that section. There's a comment from Keo Hirata. In the report on pages 67 and 73, the mention of, in quotes, fencing being effective to protect watersheds, end quote. Can you share data to show the effectiveness? Thank you for this comment. We also had similar comments on Tuesday. So kind of what we discussed regarding that was that we'll need to look over and make sure that we're including more resources. So kind of the broader conversation that came out of that was making sure that we're kind of citing resources and citing any sources for comments and information like that. And if we aren't able to find appropriate resources, then steering away from kind of broad statements like We do understand that it is a very, hot topic, and can be very controversial. There's a lot of different perspectives on the kind of success of fencing when it comes to ungulate management and protection of watersheds. So we're going to look through the draft and make sure that we can better address those concerns. Sherry, this is going to be a question for you from Uncle Glenn. Who are the private water users doing agriculture with groundwater? I think this was coming up in that section of the slideshow after you went over the major kind of water producers, and then there was kind of a grouping of private water users. Can you speak to that at all?
I don't have those individual names off the top of my head, so that's something that I'm going to have to look into our data and get back to you on. Yeah.
And I would add too, I mean, there's a range of agricultural wells that are used from, some of the larger ranches and to individual, Cavella Plantation, Moloka'i Ranch, and ag research like former Monsanto is definitely some that are, public names, but I don't know that we would disclose individual owners of wells. That's not necessarily information we've provided in the plan.
I was on mute, sorry about that. Sherry, I wanted to confirm, there was a comment from Auntie Lori Buchanan that 0.5% came from the community plan. That's that 0.5% increase. So yeah, sorry, go ahead. Sherry.
Yes, that came from the community plan.
Also,
I can chip in on that one too. Yeah, there were so again, I mean, this plan has to be consistent with the Molokai community plan, and the population forecast in the plan had those three scenarios, right? No growth, mid-range growth, which was the 0.5%, and the higher annual growth of 1%. So that's where we derived that from.
I also wanted to make a comment that there is some discussion going on in the chat. I haven't gotten to it yet, but I do want to just mention that, we are talking about some heated things that have pretty major impacts. And so I just want to remind everyone, let's do our best not to let the chat box kind of get away with us. And, I do appreciate everyone's comments, and I do appreciate discussion, and want to make sure that, we are facilitating discussion. But I also want to make sure that, if we're on kind of what feels like opposite ends of a particular concern, I don't want to allow our chat or conversation to get too far away from us. So just a quick reminder about that. Jumping back up to the chat box, comment from Auntie Lori that the SWPP is useless. Sorry, that was her comment. Also a comment about high growth scenario would exceed sustainable yield. Yes, we did mention that to a couple slides after your comment about concerns for Kuala Pu'u specifically. Comment from Uncle Glenn, where will the 11 MG for ag come from? I think that is the question. And that's something that we're having to kind of grapple with, utilizing the framework and the data that we have. And that is something that we're gonna try to have together for the public review draft, which is the next step. Comment from Jonathan Scheuer. It is interesting to look at the Water Use Development Plan as a framework for matching supply to demand, but it makes me wonder how that differs between places that are designated versus undesignated. So I'm assuming that's like a groundwater management area designation or surface water management area designation. In designated areas, there are specific ways in which sources versus uses are supposed to be evaluated. Auntie Lori said yes, Jonathan, for that comment. I think that's something that we can discuss in more depth with Seaworm. Yeah, Sherry?
Yes, and and I think part of that too is, as Lily had mentioned before, having a little bit more of that context of some of the regulatory and policy considerations. That's where that would come in, I think.
Thanks, Sherry. Okay, next comment was from Uncle Glenn. The challenge is serving West Moloka'i. County has approved 2 hotel sites and also hundreds of house lots that have yet to be built, such as Moana Makani. Once approved, water needs to be allocated for that use. This will create a clash in Kualapu'u aquifer. Comments also from Auntie Lori Buchanan, agreed, Glenn. This is why I want Townscape to address desalination in the draft. Let me make sure I got everything. I'm gonna go through the other comments kind of on the same vein. So from Nancy McPherson, if potential water demand based on existing entitlements in West End can't be supported by the aquifers, then the land should be downzoned back to ag. They'll never be able to get subdivision approval anyway. Sherry, can you by chance speak to the role of the water plan to the county land use plan, and maybe get into some of the limitations of what we have, the limitations we have with the water plan when it comes to, its interaction with land use and zoning.
So the way that, well, my understanding, for better or worse, is that the water plans are supposed to address and support the land use plans. There is disagreement as to whether or not that's appropriate, but our understanding of how what the mandates are is that, we take a look at what the land use plans say, and through the water plans, try to figure out how that water could become available.
I just need to comment quickly though. A lot of you folks, I think, are aware that the Water Commission staff has been working for the last, I'm going to say 2 years, to revise the so-called framework that provides the technical direction for these water use and development plans. I haven't seen a draft, but the staff recently told me that they are almost finished with their detailed draft. So it will be interesting to see if the language that ties the water plans to the land use plans will be changed or altered. I don't know. But for my point of view, quite frankly, is that water is such an essential and valuable resource that the water plans cannot just blindly follow land use plans.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Sherry. Okay, next comment from Auntie Lori Buchanan. Notes for Townscape. So this is a county plan, but quote state initiative. For example, rain follows the forest. That came from the state and not from Moloka'i. From Mitchell Moore, there are people that live on the West End that have nothing to do with the ranch. The data shows that actual water use is mostly for potable. We need water as a matter of survival. The water system for the West End should be public, which will solve most issues. Nancy, comment from Nancy, even though DHHL's projections for surface water use for ag seem high, ag use recharges the aquifer to some degree. Is this concept included anywhere? I think we haven't delved into it. And I think also it depends on the type of agricultural use and whether or not it would recharge. So that's something that we'll have to look at in more detail. Also from Auntie Lori Buchanan for Townscape, 5.8 Kalaupapa. Leaving it out of this plan is unacceptable to me, only because of the jurisdiction. So I think that's referring to, technically, Kalaupapa is its own county called Kalawao County, which is administered outside of the jurisdiction of Maui County. Typically, the Water Use and Development Plan would include anything outside of the county, but we are working to include as much data as we're able to access, and as much information as we're able to get about the kind of water systems and water resources there. So just wanted to clarify that. Her comment goes on to say the water for Kalaupapa is coming from the same mountain sources and needs to be included. Future management of lands may change, and Moloka'i is one island with one resource. Yes, definitely. Nancy pointed out a misspelling for Kaluako'i in figure 7-5. Thank you, Nancy. Auntie Lori Buchanan for Townscape 7.12 and 7.13, future use and implications. Again, the issue throughout the water plan is the lack of comprehensive current data. Due to historical lack of monitoring, it's hard to support any of these projections. Yes, definitely understand. There were a lot of challenges in putting those projections together, so we definitely understand it's hard to kind of take any of that information for fact, because there are, gaps that we have noted. Comment from Uncle Glenn Tevez: in order for the state or county to take it over, I think this is in reference to the West End water system. They would ask Moloka'i Ranch to bring it up to standard. West End development used ag designation to circumvent community input. And it was a scam that we have to live with, just like the road. The state or county would take it over if it was brought up to standard, and this would cost tens of billions. Again, these are comments in the chat box. Thank you. Okay, from Auntie Lori, number 9, water resource options. Again, get specific naming dear impacts, but does not speak to the negative, degrading, big ag practices that have left our South and West lands a dust bowl that were then exasperated by deer. Yes, Auntie Lori, we can look at that and try to kind of better incorporate that information into the next draft of the plan. Comment from Mitchell Moore: this may be so, but just because the ranch is a poor operator, it does not diminish the need for potable water on the West End. The actual demand is mostly for drinking water. Providing water for this purpose is a goal of the draft. We need to solve the issue, which is the operator, not the customer. Comment from Auntie Lori Buchanan: 9.3 water reuse. DOH needs to get their act together for gray water and other recycled water. From Norm Risk: the Moloka'i Ranch might be willing to negotiate major land gifts and other concessions to get the county to take over roads and the water system. This would be in everyone's best interest, particularly for residents of Mauna Loa and other residents of the West End who are distinct from the ranch. There are increasing interest in development of ag land on the West End as well, and other residents of the West End. Uncle Glenn Tevez kind of commenting on the same thread: I agree, Mitchell, but getting it away from Moloka'i Ranch is a challenge since they're an absentee water purveyor who's holding everyone hostage. The issue is Moloka'i Ranch doesn't respond. It would be interesting if they came to the table. Comment from Auntie Lori Buchanan: can you discuss desalination and why it's in the draft? Yes, so it's in the draft because it has come up in comments from folks, and it is a potential water supply source. However, it may not be appropriate, and that is something, even though it's in the list, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is going to be carried over into the next step, and that we're going to say, X amount of water needs to come from desalinization. I think that we would be remiss to not have it on the list, especially because it has been suggested by community folks. But I think that it's our kuleana to look more into the appropriateness and the impact of desalinization, if we're to speak to whether it is an appropriate water source for any of the supply that's needed. Comment again, land use, water, and zoning. The government is not on the same page, no matter what our values are. That's from Auntie Lori Buchanan. And also, this I think was her comment in response to Bruce's mention about the updated plan. Cannot wait to see that CWRM plan too. From Norm Risk, residents of the West End can facilitate that since we're dependent on the ranch for water, and the ranch would like to give up the roads and the water. Uncle Glenn Tevez, Norman, this would cost tens of millions for the road and water system. I don't think the political will is there. The other issue is you shouldn't be using surface water for domestic use. Auntie Lori Buchanan said, yay, Bruce, agreed. I think that was in response to the updated plan. Mitchell Moore, Glenn, I couldn't agree more, but isn't that the issue we're trying to solve? So let's work together to come up with a sensible plan for the West End. We need to take ranch history out of the picture and find a path for all for the future. Uncle Glenn Tevez, I agree with you. Nancy, ag does recharge groundwater. Auntie Lori, I still no agree townscape about Kalaupapa. Auntie Lori, did you want to chime in more about that?
Oh, wow, we can talk.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to get through these comments as best I could.
No. It doesn't make sense that they're using the same water resources that is counted in the sustainable yield for the entire island, but yet you're going, just because they in a different county, then, it's just that invisible jurisdictional line. Then maybe they should be getting their water tunneled in from Oahu, and not from Molokai, if that's the big issue. So because, it's like the baby, I always tell them, it's Kalaupapa is like that pudding baby. You cannot just cut your baby off. I mean, they're part of Molokai and they're using the same water, the same resources. And so they should be in the plan. And if not, then maybe they need bottled water. I don't know, from Molokai. It's not to be rude or anything, but to me, it's really challenging Kalaupapa and the issues of Kalaupapa just because of jurisdictional issues that may change in the near future. So
Yeah.
Why would we be remiss to include it in a plan that is going to go out to 2040? It just doesn't make sense. Thank you, Lily.
Yep, agreed. I think that we are doing our best to include as much information as we can. I'll toss it over to Sherry, but I did just want to say there's kind of two components that come to mind. One is just like we're struggling, there's kind of a general struggle, I think, for anyone who prepares a water use and development plan. There's a struggle to get appropriate data, kind of up-to-date data. And so, we do rely on the data that is available to us. And that's what we have included so far in this preliminary draft. And then the other component would be kind of community consultation or community engagement. That is a huge challenge to try to engage with folks that are in Kalaupapa for it to be kind of integrated into the plan. And so I think we definitely want to include as much information as we can, but I think there's going to be limits to how kind of thorough, how comprehensive we can be, kind of because of those jurisdictional challenges. Sherry, did I miss anything?
Yeah, we actually do have a little bit about Kalaupapa in there. We did get some water data from the Water Commission on water use, and it's in the document. And we did have a little bit about projected water use as well. So trying.
Thanks, Sherry. Comments from Uncle Glenn Tevez. The problem is the water needs per acre are increasing due to climate change. Last year in August, we were up to 3 inches per acre. This needs to be figured into the water use equation. Auntie Lori also mentioned the water code recognized desal as bad. And Uncle Glenn chimed in and said desalinization was voted down in the Moloka'i community plan. The water plan needs to be consistent with the community plan. Also agreed with Lori, the Waihanau Valley water is a DHHL source. And Auntie Lori said, townscape at the very least put those sentences into this draft. Agreed. All of the comments that we're getting, we're going to be integrating into the draft. And so thank you very much. I do want to open it up now for anyone who, if you'd like to continue to put comments or questions into the chat box, feel free to do so. Excuse me. If you'd like to share a comment or ask a question, you can raise your hand, or you're welcome to just unmute and it will pop up to the top of my little list and I will call on folks. So for anyone who has comments or questions, now is a good time. Take clarification from Uncle Glenn, 3 acre inches per week. Comment from Uncle Mango Steven. When consulting with Kalau Papa, DHHL should be included as they will be using the water when the park lease is over. Thank you for that. Auntie Lori, thank you, Sherry, Bruce, Eva, Lily, and all working on this plan for your hard work with time. Thank you for showing up to the meeting, everybody, and for your comments and questions and the discussion in the chat box. Super helpful for what we're trying to do. Again, just a reminder, if anybody would like to make a comment or ask a question, you're welcome to unmute or to raise your hand, and we can call on you.
Aloha, this is Cora. Hi, guys. I do have one. I was looking at those handouts, and the way it's written, it looks at all the different districts. It would have been nice to, I didn't find it very sensitive to what I was looking for. The way you got it written down doesn't really go into different districts, but you just stayed focused on just the water piece of it. And you went through the different region like southeast, southwest, or, I would have liked to have it breaking down more into districts or ahupua'as. Didn't know, how are you folks measuring wastewater? You measure everything else. So I was just wondering, how would you measure the wastewater? And because it's important if you're looking at recycling gray water, and so I was just wondering, you got it would be helpful to know how much gray water we're looking at to recycle. So there you go. Those are my questions and my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, see, Cora. Sherry, I don't believe that we have any data on wastewater included in the plan at this point. And I think we'll have to look into it more once we start looking into if there's kind of utilizing recycled water or gray water for like reuse water as a potential source option. Eva, I saw that you had unmuted if you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, I just want to add, I mean, we have looked at, even that's not presented yet, looking at resource options, of course, if reclaimed water was a resource option. Right now, it's not available because there is no reclaimed water available from Kanakakai wastewater. There's none of that is recycled for the county. That doesn't mean that that could not be an option in the future, especially as an alternative source if there are specific areas that are where you have conventional sources being really short. So reclaimed water, gray water will be looked at as a resource option, including how much will be available and the cost in comparison to other options. And also on the other hand, where there's not wastewater systems, cesspools and septic systems in terms of is that water quality an issue for available groundwater in an area, for example. So it's definitely it's an integral part of the plan. It's not the focus of it, but we will look at recycled water and wastewater to that extent.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Eva. Okay, I have a comment in the chat box from Jonathan Scheuer. I appreciate the hard work and good intentions of the county and townscape. The draft is a good collection of more recent data, and the description of issues is helpful. I'm still thinking about how this will be of practical use to the community and water purveyors on the island.
That's, excuse me, throat's not doing too well today. No, and that's great. I mean, how is any of this really going to, I guess, shape the practical side of it? We're hoping that this translates into water source. What makes sense in terms of what we're looking at, what gets used, how is it analyzed, and how do the different water sources I guess combine to be sustainable. It seems very kind of like words, a lot of words right now, and I'm hoping that, you know, in our next iteration, the connecting lines are drawn more clearly. Sorry, it's not so clear right now, but we are also still going through the process and trying to sort through all of the information. But I see you, and I see you, Jonathan. You want to say something else?
If I may, I just,
Yeah.
early on in one of your earlier sessions, I think the idea was raised that so it was in the context of people seeking water use permits for Kuala Pu'u and other places. And Uncle Walter had said, you know, let's not just talk about taking water out of the cup. Let's talk about how do we put water back into the cup. And so, you know, there was the idea that it might have on a slightly more detailed level, rather than saying things like watershed protection is good, more like, okay, what are critical areas of watershed that could have more, you know, levels of management to it that would actually increase that? Are there projects identified in other plans or by the community that are like pending, so that there would be a suite of options available to people who want to develop water, or the Water Commission to say like, okay, if you want to take water out here's some of the ways in which you can also help enhance and increase the water resources of the island. So it's like connecting the issues, the values, and what you're saying about sources that I was hoping. Just my thought was that idea had emerged from the community.
Let me add to that, because I sat in on a couple of conversations that Townscape team had with individuals from Moloka'i Land Trust to Moloka'i Ranch to individuals working in the watershed. So actually trying to pinpoint more, are there specific areas that would be more priority being feasible for reforestation? What were the challenges? So I think we're kind of looking at more specific, not that this is a watershed management plan, you know, not trying to develop new BMPs, but looking at realistic areas with watershed protection and reforestation as a tool.
Yeah, and I think in some cases, what we would do is, because as Eva said, this is not a watershed management plan, but we can still refer people to those plans that are there, or to the entities that are doing some of the programming, but making some of those connections as well.
Oh,
You know, I wanted to make a comment going into this whole policy thing, my expectation was a little bit different. You know, I thought that maybe with all these information that you folks will be, you know, have gathered, that there will be some sort of direction or some helpful tips as to the different areas of allocating the water, you know, more in depth, more district oriented. And so I don't know how helpful, to be quite honest, this is. It's like creating the wheel again with the USGS. They did a study, and with the state, and you know, with DHHL, and so it's almost like creating a wheel almost, but not so much a sense of direction and purpose. I mean, I know there's goals and values, and you know, anyway, that's just my manao. Thank you.
Thank you, Cora. I do want to comment on that. I think it is really important to understand that this preliminary draft is incomplete. So it is missing the major section that we kind of begin to discuss in section 9. So I think, Auntie Cora, you're absolutely correct. And it's because this draft is incomplete. So the preliminary draft is meant to kind of carry over and present all the information that we've collected so far, and also kind of express those values and the kind of guiding principles that we've expressed in here. And I think our hope was to utilize this preliminary draft as a check-in before the public review draft. And, you know, in our experience with kind of putting together water use and development plans, oftentimes you have the public review draft as the first time that community folks are seeing what is put in the plan. And I think that leads to a lot of challenges. And it was a big concern of ours that if we went all the way to doing this kind of complete draft and a public review draft, and that if we checked in with community at that point, that we would miss major opportunities to get corrections earlier on. So thank you, Auntie Cora, for mentioning that, because I think it is really important that we kind of look at this preliminary draft for what it is, which is an incomplete draft. I also wanted to mention the next couple comments from Uncle Glenn Teves. Cesspool water recharges the aquifer in Ho'olehua. And also Uncle Mango Stevens, studies prove soil filters the gray water. Contaminants get stuck in the soil and clean water reaches the aquifer. Mahalo for those comments. Again, I want to open it up. If folks have comments or questions, feel free to drop it into the chat box. Also, feel free to unmute or raise your hand. Now is a good time. We are at 7:35, I think, if my 7:30, so 7:30 on the dot. I think my laptop is 5 minutes fast. So we are kind of right about wrap up time, but I don't want to miss any comments or questions that folks might have. So again, if you have a comment or question, feel free to put it in the chat box. Feel free to unmute or raise your hand and we can discuss. Okay, I'm not seeing any more comments or questions. I did want to mention again about the meeting. So we did record Tuesday's meeting, and this meeting is being recorded. We will have them posted on the project website. So anyone who had to leave early, or if you joined late and you wanted to kind of watch the presentation and get that information, you can check it out there. Also wanted to mention that we have a comment period, which is going to the end of the year. And there are a bunch of different ways that folks can share comments. Sherry, do you mind screen sharing Yes, so hard copies and hard copy comment sheets are available in person, Kilohana Elementary, Mauna Loa Elementary, Molokai High School, Molokai Public Library, and Maui County Molokai District Office. All of those locations have hard copies of both the preliminary draft for anyone who wants to look at a printed version, and also has hard copy mailers of comment sheets. You can visit the project website online, and you can see the draft. I'm going to drop a link in here. There's a direct link in the chat box if you want to view the preliminary draft online, and also a way to provide comments online. And in addition to that, you folks are welcome to just reach out to me directly. I had some folks tell me that they don't want to use the comment form or anything like that. And so you're welcome to just send in any comments or questions using email. And this right here has a QR code. So if you wanted to, there's a link tree that has all the different links to different things. You can just hover your camera over that QR code and it'll give you the link. Again, my contact information is there. I'll put my contact information. I think, Sherry, you can go ahead and take that off. And I think if we don't have any last minute questions or comments, then we'll go ahead and close the meeting. Just wanted to say thank you to everyone for taking time to be here. Thank you so much for all of the comments and questions that came up in the chat box and all of the discussion. We very much appreciate your time. Yeah, and you guys can have a great evening. Feel free to reach out to us with any questions or comments that we have. Mahalo to everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Aloha.
Bye, Jonathan. Thank you. Bye, Norm. Thanks, everybody.